The chasm yawned wide as a canyon at his feet, and warm, wet, rancid air wafted up over him like breath from a sleeping beast. The stench was worse than the sewers, feral and alive, the kind that sank into your lungs and made your tongue taste of copper. Horace Blithe racked the back of his throat and pulled up a long rope of phlegm and spat it down into the dark. Not that he wanted to perpetuate the thought, but this crevice had become something of a dumping ground over the last few years. It wasn't any good for much else, he supposed. The foundation had never set right, and the street had caved in a few years back. Too deep to see the bottom, save for the mountain of waste too foul for even the city to reclaim. This place belonged to the rats and the roaches now. Deep down that black hole, the pale mountain buried beneath the city lay in wait. Tangled bones shifted in the dark, a mass grave with no headstone. He squinted into the gloom and wondered, just for a moment, how many of those bones he'd put down there himself. 4 years he'd been at this whole Rotwork business. 4 long years that seemed to all blur together. 4 years he'd been nothing more than a passenger in the happenings of a life that claimed him for some reason. Billy chuffed and his hoof clopped on the mud and cobblestone. Horace knew what he wanted. Pulled a red apple from his jacket and fixed it between his hands, gave it a twist and split it clean in two. He held his hand flat with one half, and Billy took the whole treat, then nudged Horace's shoulder for more. "Oh, don't you get greedy on me, oh boy. You'll get the rest when the job's done, right?"
"First half now, the rest when the job is done,"
Albie had said, and the rules that applied to Horace applied to Billy too. Horace patted his coat pocket, which contained his first half inside. 6 twisted maidens jingled back. His eyes roamed the rooftops that leaned like a row of drunks stitched together with timber too soft to fight the damp. Windows cockeyed, frames swollen with rot, roofs patched with tin and tar that stank in the sun. And somewhere above, the bells tolled the midnight hour, dull and heavy through the fog. Further off, the faint clop of hooves echoed from the distant streets. The city still pretending to be alive, while the ground beneath remembered otherwise. The ground here, this deep in the bowl, was always damp, always soft. The stone and brick stopped pretending. Here was the Grubway, the city's belly, where the ground sagged under its own weight, where pipes burst and were never fixed, where the walls sweated rust, and the bones sank deeper every year. And then his eyes landed on the cart Billy pulled behind him. The tops of weighed down burlap sacks peeked out, and between them was a lumpy sheet. "Right then, to work, eh?" Billy nickered and bobbed his head. Horace clicked his tongue and Billy's heavy hooves plodded forward. The stones underfoot gave way to packed mud, then muck, then something worse. The stink of rot thickened. The air warmed, not from the sun, but from the breath of the earth itself. Horace tipped the first bag over the edge. The soiled linens, drapes, and bloodstained cloth tumbled silently into the dark. Then came the pails. Lukewarm water turned ruddy and thick with filth. He poured it all out like bathwater down a drain, watching the glistening red arc disappear into the pit. Last came the body. He peeled back the blanket, slow and workmanlike. The skin of the gutter bell caught the light. Too pale, almost like porcelain. There was something fragile in the way she lay there, something that reminded him of a doll on a shelf. Her lips were a deep shade of blue now, a grayish red sore on the lower. She was on lease for the evening, no doubt. Probably it was her John that stabbed her in the throat with a pocket knife he'd left next to her. A working girl, a sensitive man, and the whole night to themselves. If that's not a recipe for a crime of passion, Horace didn't know what was. But her killer must have known someone, or, as was usually the case, known someone who knew someone. Elsewise, Horace wouldn't have had bloody walls to clean or a body to dump. Oh yes, the life of a Rotwork man was a glamorous one indeed. He gathered her into his arms. She weighed less than he expected, and more than he'd hoped. Then he stepped to the edge of the trench, without prayer nor ceremony, and let her go. She fell into the black like a stone into water and landed atop the pile below, limbs splayed, head tilted. Horace could still see her pale skin through the shadow of the pit. This was her final place of rest, the newest ornament atop that grim sculpture, a beautiful, rotten crown atop the pile of the endless dead. Horace had known a few of the people he'd put down there. Not all of her company would be unpleasant, at least. He could still remember his first time at this Rotwork business. It wasn't what he wanted, and it sure as hell wasn't what he expected. But it paid, and it kept paying. The rustling began slow. This was the part that Horace liked least. Slick paws on damp stone, then faster, skittering. Like a ripple in the shadows they came. First, dozens of them, then hundreds. No fear, no flinching. Fat ones with yellow teeth and tails like severed cords. They swarmed over the body like it was ritual, chewing in silence, save for the wet snap of tendon, the crack of bone, and that awful, gleeful chorus of squeals that followed. Horace watched. She wasn't a big girl, small even, but a feast for the rats, nonetheless. One of the red-eyed creatures paused at the edge of the pile. It looked up at him just for a second, head tilted as if thinking. Then it turned and vanished beneath the ribs. As he turned to leave, a shape moved in the fog, a long coat and a slow gait, a black coat. Horace stiffened. He couldn't see the face at first, only the glint of a badge under the moonlight. He reached into his coat and felt for the twisted maidens in his pocket, just in case the wheels needed a little grease tonight.
Oh, Mr. Blythe, evening. Well, you come to pay your respects.
Officer McShaw? Working, I'm afraid.
I'll make my visit short then, shall I?
Horace felt a pang of guilt pierce his heart. Had I known you'd be here...
Oh, nonsense. We all need money, don't we?
It does have a knack for making the world go round, don't it? An unspoken sorrow nestled uncomfortably in the officer's eyes. A bouquet hung from his hand. They'd have been beautiful if the night weren't so bleak. He didn't come any closer. Didn't want to see what the hole had become, no doubt. So he dropped a knee and placed the flowers on the ground a ways away from the edge. Horace heard him whisper something to the dirt. Then the black coat gave a long look towards the trench, offered a respectful nod to Blithe, and without another word, he vanished into the fog. Horace always did like McShaw. He struck him as a man who appreciated practicality and desperation, a rare man of empathy. Well, how could you not be when you both lost the same thing? He had known McShaw since before. The way he saw it, he was saving the Blackcoats the headache of dealing with messes like this. He was a friend to the lawman, our Horace. Before he left, he turned back to the hole where he could still see the gutter bell perched atop the heap. 1,000 glowing eyes skittering over her, all squealing and gnawing and ripping, all giving thanks to Horace. He was a friend to the rats, too. The pay always came from the same place, a pub called the Latchkey, sunk low off Barrel Street. It had no sign, only a door with rusted hinges and a single red lantern above it, dim and always flickering, like it might burn out for good at any moment. Horace pushed through the warped door and into the sour warmth of spilled ale and old wood smoke. The floorboards creaked like they remembered every fight ever started here. Shadows clung to the corners, only 3 men inside. A drunk asleep at the bar, a barkeep with a ruined face polishing a cloudy glass, and the man at the table in the back. Albie Crow, middleman, always wore a cravat too fine for the job, like he thought himself a banker instead of a messenger. He nodded when Horace entered, slid a small burlap pouch across the table without a word. Any other time, Horace would have just taken the purse and left, but as he took it up, something caught his eye. There, on the other side of Albie, a pair of antennas peeked over the table's edge, a lone cockroach on the hunt for something filthy. and Albie raised a brow.
Problem?
Horace jerked his head at the critter. Albie damn near leapt from his skin. The table sure leapt with him.
Mother mine!
Albie cried out and instantly scooted out of his booth. He wasted no time at all in getting the barman's attention, berating his cleanliness in the process.
Where there's one of those fucking things, there's 1,000 more soon to follow.
Horace didn't move. He just watched that little bug march across that tabletop, straight for the plate, and past it. The little fucker was crawling straight towards him. He almost didn't believe his eyes, and he almost felt a chill run along his spine. But then the little cockroach stopped, right on the edge of the table, pointed straight at Horace. Horace's eyebrows pinched, and he loosened his collar. The bug didn't move. Little brown wings on its back flickered. It felt like the bug was watching, exclusively, specifically. It was an odd feeling of the hand of the barkeep crushed the thought along with the roach. He turned to Albie, and with all the charisma of a drunk stage magician and the flamboyant hand movements to boot, he spoke.
One, only one, you see. I fix problem, eh?
He said, holding up his hand, a black, greasy splatter on his palm. As Horace stepped back out into the street, he could still hear Albie screaming at the top of his lungs. Rot. If you wanted to find it, you needn't look further than Cherry Hill. It seeped from all the offices of the pillars, down through the slums and into the grubways beneath. It wore 100 faces, decay in the flesh, mold in the air, the stink of squalor in the alleys. But the worst of it lived inside, in the soul. The city wasn't becoming rotten, it was rot, through and through. Every heart blackened by greed, every hand dirtied by some foul trade, every shadow haunted by ghosts no one dared name. It wasn't just the filth you could scrape from brick and bone. It was the filth that people carried in their bellies, like a sickness they refused to cure. What little magic there was in the world had turned sour. Politics turned cruel, and even the dead refused to rest. Cherry Hill had already lost. The rot had won long ago, and most were either content enough or too distracted with their lot to even notice. Horace understood now. No one was clean, and no one was safe. All you could do was survive in it, learn to move with the rot, or be drowned by it. There was a few years where Horace would have counted himself among those happy fools, but now he looked at them with wonder and more than a little envy. Horace trudged across the street towards Billy with the cart. He was tired. Even at 30, his body was wearing thin. He didn't eat much anymore, having lost his appetite somewhere along the way. But that wasn't old Billy's way. The Shire stood steady, broad-shouldered and unmoved by the creeping cold. His dappled gray coat had long since stained the color of wet stone. Patches of mud dried like old bruises on his flanks. He watched Horace approach with one great eye, patient and expectant. Horace fished out the other half of the apple from his pocket, softened now, a little bruised from the night's work. He held it flat on his palm. Didn't forget you, old boy. Billy's lips worked over the fruit, slow and deliberate, savoring the sweetness. Horace stroked the horse's neck, stared down the empty street ahead. He listened to Billy's chewing, the heavy, wet sound of contentment, and found some comfort in it. If he couldn't find peace, he was at least glad of his nags. Now we're square, aren't we? He said and patted the horse's side. Billy gave a low snort and bobbed his head, as if in agreement. It earned a fleeting smile from Horace. As he went to climb into the saddle, Billy shifted. His hooves tapped nervously against the stone, his ears twitched, head turned slightly. He had heard something that Horace couldn't. He held his breath and listened close. There was a rustle, faint but deliberate. Not the random scurrying of rats or the aimless skitter of a roach. This was deeper, a ripple of movement beneath the street, like the city was shifting in its sleep. Horace knelt, pressed a hand to the ground. For a breath, he swore he felt it, that slow, steady pulse. Not quite a quake, not quite alive, but familiar. Something in his chest stirred, something half forgotten and half rotted. the way old wounds sometimes ache before a storm. And then it stopped. Billy huffed, restless. Horace stared into the fog, certain for a moment that he wasn't the only one listening. But the city held its breath. "Rot don't know when to quit," he muttered as he climbed into the saddle. And then, together, they disappeared into the fog. Well, howdy, traveler, and thank you for sitting a spell by the fire with me for episode 1 of Rotwork. Episode 2 will be along next week, so if you're keen to hear the rest of Horace's dark tale, go on and subscribe wherever you're listening. If you're a fan and you want more, you can find From Shallow Graves on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're a little like me, you ain't got much patience. So if you'd rather not wait, click the link to my Patreon. You'll get early access to all the episodes, plus a behind-the-scenes look at what all goes into making this show. If you've a mind to contribute to the world of From Shallow Graves, I'd be mighty pleased to hear from you. Follow the link in the description to join our Reddit community, where you might just find yourself telling your own story by this very fire. Today's episode was written and performed by Red Edwards. Until next time, traveler, keep your lantern lit, 'cause remember, we ain't alone out here.